Okay, so you've all been sending in some sources about what's going on in the world of Google SEO.
Mm-hmm.
And, one thing that keeps coming up again and again is this whole March 2025 core update from Google.
Yeah,
So that's what we're diving deep on today. We're
absolutely.
going to try and, kind of cut through all the hype and really understand, what does this update
Right.
actually mean for us as we're creating content, for people to engage with online.
Yeah, for sure. And you've brought some really, really fascinating information here.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is like sitting here today, March 19th, 2025,
Right.
we're actually in the middle of this update.
We are, yeah.
So it started rolling out March 13th.
Uh-huh.
And it's anticipated to take about 2 weeks
Okay.
to fully roll out, which would put it ending around March 27th.
Gotcha. So we're in it right now.
Yeah.
So, this might be, for some people listening, this might be the first time they've even heard of the
Right.
Google Core update, or maybe they've heard the term, but they're like, I don't really know what that means.
Yeah.
So maybe let's just take a step back for a second and just, acknowledge like sometimes it feels like Google's ranking systems are just like this, constantly changing.
It's like algorithm soup, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is. It's like algorithm soup. Like, I don't know what's going on.
Right.
But let's zoom out for a second and just say, like, why do these core updates even matter?
Yeah, that's a great question to start with.
Yeah.
Because it is sort of a foundational question.
Mm-hmm.
These core updates are essentially huge revisions that Google makes to their search ranking mechanisms several times a year.
Okay.
And they're really fundamentally aimed at just improving the quality of search results.
Mm-hmm.
So when you type in a query,
Right.
Google wants to give you information that's not just relevant to your keywords, but also is genuinely useful.
Yeah.
Satisfying gives you a good answer to your query. And it's important to keep in mind that while these are like big changes happening,
Right.
the majority of websites usually don't experience like massive fluctuations
No.
in their traffic.
Okay. So for most sites, it's kind of business as usual,
Yeah.
and then for those who do see shifts,
Mm-hmm.
what would you say is kind of the key takeaway
Yeah.
in terms of this March 2025 update?
Yeah.
Like, what is it that Google is really trying to fine tune this time around?
It seems like there are two primary objectives.
Okay.
So first, further refining the relevance
Okay.
and the quality of the search results that are presented to you.
Mm-hmm.
And then second, this update seems to really be emphasizing
Okay.
greater visibility for content that's coming directly from creators.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and this is the first core update of 2025.
Right.
We had one in December of 2024,
Mm-hmm.
but this is the first one of this year.
Okay.
And what's interesting too is the time frame.
Yeah.
It's expected to be about 2 weeks, which is,
That seems fair.
yeah, a lot shorter than the March 2024 core update, which was 45 days long.
Wow. That sounds like a long time to be in that kind of, limbo period.
It was a long one.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that, that this rollout is quicker.
Right.
So with that, what kinds of, shifts in content prioritization are we seeing
Yeah.
from Google? Like, what are some of the things that you and I, as people who create content,
Right.
as website operators, what should we be paying attention to?
Well, the overarching message that keeps getting like more and more amplified
Okay.
is this idea of helpful people first content.
Okay.
The idea here is that you should be creating content for your audience, the actual human beings who are going to read it
Yeah.
and engage with it and hopefully find it valuable
Right.
rather than trying to optimize for search engines.
Right. Creating for humans, not for robots.
Exactly. And that means making sure that your content's clear, easy to understand, and you know that your website offers like a straightforward user experience.
Right. So it's, making it easy for people to actually use your website and find what they're looking for.
Exactly.
Usability is key.
Yeah, and that's something that we've heard before,
Mm-hmm.
but it definitely feels like Google is kind of reinforcing this
Definitely.
with each update.
Yeah, they're doubling down.
Yeah. So let's say, somebody is listening to this and they're like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
the update is rolled out,
Right.
and now I'm seeing that my traffic has gone down.
Yeah.
What would you say is like the absolute worst first reaction?
The worst thing you can do is just start making like knee-jerk changes
Okay.
based on like speculation or,
Yeah.
what you're hearing through the grapevine.
Yeah, don't panic.
Yeah, don't panic and like immediately, start taking down pages
Right.
or changing all your content based on some hunch.
Right.
What you should really focus on is making sustainable improvements
Okay.
that actually benefit your users.
So that might mean going back and looking at sections that are confusing, maybe reorganizing your content so it's easier to read and navigate.
Right.
Maybe expanding on areas where, users might need more information
Yeah.
to really understand.
So it's about, not just trying to like trick the system or something,
Exactly.
but actually like creating something of value.
Long-term value.
Long-term value, yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that was, in the information you provided, which I thought was interesting, was this idea of actually deleting content,
Yeah.
which sounds kind of counterintuitive.
It does.
and
Like,
maybe-
why would you delete content?
Right. So it is important to say this should be like a last resort.
Okay.
But Google does say that if your website has a lot of content that's unhelpful, outdated, really low quality,
Right.
removing that could potentially actually improve the performance of
Interesting.
your remaining better content.
Okay, so it's like if you've got some stuff that's really dragging you down.
It might actually be better to just get rid of it.
Yeah, it's like decluttering your digital space.
Yeah.
If it's not serving a purpose,
Yeah.
it might be holding back the rest of your content.
Okay, so the update is expected to wrap up around March 27th.
Right.
When should people start analyzing, how things have shifted on their site?
The general recommendation is to let the dust settle a little bit.
Okay.
Wait at least a full week after the update is officially done
Yeah.
before you start really digging into your analytics.
So around April 3rd,
Yeah, that's a good target.
2025. Okay. And what would you say is the primary tool that people should be using?
Google Search Console.
Google Search Console.
Yeah.
So once you're in Google Search Console, what are some of the things you should be looking at?
The most informative thing is to compare
Okay.
your website's overall traffic,
Okay.
as well as like the performance of your top pages
Right.
and the queries that are driving traffic to your site.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to compare the data from like the week before the update started to the
Okay.
week after it finishes.
Gotcha.
That will give you a really clear before and after picture.
So how much of a drop is, a cause for concern
Right.
versus just kind of normal variability?
Yeah, well, there are some helpful ranges that,
Okay.
we've seen. If you see a small decrease, like 2 to 4%,
Okay.
that's probably within the normal range of fluctuations.
Okay.
And you probably don't need to like freak out
Right.
and make any huge changes.
So panic.
But if you're seeing larger drops like 4 to 29%,
Okay.
then you definitely want to do a deeper dive.
And so where would you suggest people go to kind of do that deeper dive?
In those cases, you really want to look at your content
Yep.
through the lens of Google's own self-assessment guide
Okay.
for creating helpful content.
And where can people find that?
You can usually just search for Google Helpful Content Guidelines.
Okay. Easy enough.
Yeah, and that guide will basically walk you through a series of questions
Yep.
to help you figure out whether your content is really meeting the needs of your audience
Okay.
and providing value.
So it's not just about looking at the numbers.
Right.
It's about actually looking at the content itself.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's say you've done that and you've made some improvements based on that.
Mhm.
How long does it usually take for those changes to actually be reflected in Google search results?
This is where you need to have a little bit of patience.
Okay.
Because the impact of those improvements can take anywhere from, a few days to a few months
Really?
to really show up in search rankings.
Wow, okay.
And it's possible you might not see like huge changes
Okay.
until the next core update rolls around.
So it's, this isn't like a one-time thing and then you're done.
Right.
This is an ongoing process.
Yeah, it's an ongoing iterative thing.
Okay, so let's zoom out again and think about this in the bigger picture.
Okay.
Are there any other trends or initiatives from Google
Yeah.
in 2025 that are kind of connected to this particular core update?
Yeah, absolutely. So this March 2025 core update is really part of a larger effort from Google that's been going on throughout 2025 to really tackle spam and low quality content across the web.
Interesting.
And we saw this with the December 2024 spam update as well, which was specifically targeting things like, low quality content.
Okay.
That's basically trying to piggyback on the authority of established websites.
I've heard that called parasite SEO.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
And all of this is really aligned with Google's goal of prioritizing high quality, valuable content
Right.
over just sheer volume.
So it's not just about how much content you have.
Right.
It's about the quality.
It's about quality over quantity.
Right.
And not trying to game the system.
So basically people should not be, listening to what their, cousins, roommates
Right.
dog walkers saying about SEO.
Exactly. Don't rely on hearsay.
Yeah.
You know, really refer to Google's official guidelines.
Right.
And focus on developing like a sustainable content strategy
Right.
that really puts the user first.
Yeah, there's no magic bullet here.
There are no quick fixes,
Right.
especially when it comes to these core updates.
So if we were to like boil all of this down
Mhm.
into one key message,
Yeah.
what would you say it is?
I'd say the key message is that this update is really doubling down
Okay.
on the importance of creating truly helpful, user-centric content.
Right.
And there's a real push to elevate content that's created by individuals.
It's interesting.
So if you're focused on providing valuable, well-executed information that genuinely serves your audience,
Yeah.
you're already on the right track.
Okay, so that's what to focus on. And then what about like, kind of action steps? Like
Sure.
what should people be doing?
So remember sustainable improvements to your content and your website.
Okay.
That's always going to be better than trying to do these quick fixes.
Right.
Be patient as you're watching, the effects of the update unfold, and rely on Google Search Console for your data.
Right.
And if you do see that big drop in traffic,
Yeah.
go back to those helpful content guidelines
Right.
and really do that self-assessment.
Okay, so as we're, wrapping up this deep dive on the March 2025 Google Core update,
Yeah.
I want to leave everybody listening with one final thought.
Okay.
Google is really, putting an emphasis on content created by individuals, people who are offering unique value.
Right.
So I want you to ask yourself, what can you bring?
Yeah.
What unique value can you bring to your online presence
Right.
that really resonates with and serves your audience and sets you apart from everybody else?
That's the question.
That's the question.
Yeah.
So that's something for everybody to chew on.
Absolutely.
And in the meantime, thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and we'll catch you next time.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.